be to hire an inspector that would work for the city during the summertime to help oversee these construction projects, make sure that our paperwork is in order. Most of these projects are funded by state or our own funds, so therefore we don't have the federal requirements, which are quite onerous. If they were federally funded, we almost need to have the consultant do it because there is so much paperwork that has to be managed and they have the expertise to do that. We can follow state guidelines for most of our projects and meet our needs and the requirements of our funding partners. So what I've provided is a potential job description for that position. And if approved, we can advertise that position and try and get someone in here to help us out with that during the summer. It would be basically we'll pay you. There's no benefits other than you show up and you get your check. It's, we can pay them the same as we would be paying our staff engineer and still be money ahead when you start looking at the cost of these projects. We will still need the consultant for some work. We're going to have to survey, state the projects, make sure they get done, and they have some expertise with the trail. We've got a bridge that's going in, so there's a structural component to that.
I was wondering if you could give council kind of like an estimated idea of how much business we would be saving by doing this versus the normal course of action that we would do on these projects.
If we have the inspector for 6 months and we're paying $10,000 a month, there's $60,000. Well, we have $2 to $2.5 million worth of construction at 10%. There's $250,000. So there's a huge savings right there. If we start approaching 20% on those costs, it would be, considerably more. But as I said, we will use the consultant for a few elements of the project to make sure that it is staked properly so that the contractor knows what they have to do. And there's some special instructions or special inspections that have to be done. And we'll have to hire an outside testing lab for some elements. But again, that's a minor amount of the work.
So who does the inspector, who supervises them?
The inspector would report to either myself or the city engineer.
So the question I have, when we hire that out to a private company to do that, if there's mistakes that are made and whatnot that cause overruns, they take the liability for that, correct? If it's their design and
if it was a design mistake, yes.
Okay, so if we hire this inspector and engineer, inspector, whatever, what recourse do we have to go back on anybody if the job goes south?
Well, if there's a design error, there's still a design error. It was the designer's responsibility to do it correctly.
It's the inspector's job to make sure that everything
that is being built to the approved plans and specifications. And if there's something's lacking in those plans and specifications, it is the designer's responsibility. I mean, we would call them up and say, hey, there seems to be an issue here. We need to get this resolved. But it's on them. Because there are a lot of projects, you don't necessarily hire the design firm to do it. You hire a separate firm for that very purpose to sort of double check what the designer has done.
You say there'll be no benefits or anything. I hope he will be required to be bonded, because the way things go nowadays, I'm a little paranoid.
The contractor would be bonded.
But the inspector should be bonded too, shouldn't every case to prevent any graft or anything?
I'm not quite, it is typically you haven't necessarily bonded an inspector. I mean, it's no different than when we ourselves do inspection of projects that we've designed. We're not bonded.
We just assume responsibility for his
decisions. That's the risk we take, is hiring our own guy and then trusting our guy is gonna do the right thing.
I'm sure that, under certain circumstances, he could be turned back to faulty work.
That is always a possibility. However, the contract requires the contractor to still do it right. So let's say the project's all done and a month later you find mistakes. The contractor is still responsible because they were supposed to build to the plans and specs.
Then the inspector double checks the contract, right?
Correct.
You just hope the inspector catches the mistakes before completion so that it can be corrected early.
And by having that inspector there in the field the whole time that the contractor is working. I mean, they may go back and forth between two projects, but they would be able to oversee that and make sure that it is being followed.
Well, if the inspector signs off and there's a problem on what he signed off, who's liable?
It's still the contractor's responsibility to build it to the plans and specs,
Inspector
even if he
signed
has
off.
signed off on it.
I see our lawyer nodding her head, so.
It's not right, it's a flaw, isn't it? I mean, we have building inspectors that come out and inspect new construction all the time, and they approve stuff or miss stuff, and the contractor's done, and sometimes those mistakes aren't found for 5-10 years down the road, and now the homeowner is just trying to figure out, who's responsible for this mistake. And it's never the inspector. The city's never responsible for not making sure it was built to the proper standard. It always goes back to the contractor.
There was a case like that in Pierce County about 15 years ago where someone had a home built over by Gig Harbor. And the county inspector signed everything off, and then a while later there was some significant problems with the house. The county was not responsible for that. It was still the contractor's responsibility. Unfortunately, in many cases like that, the contractor's already filed bankruptcy because the laws for construction are you go after the company, but if they don't exist, they don't exist, and they'll file for bankruptcy and start a new company the next day with a brand new name, and there's not much you can do about it.
That's what happened to us when there's sewer in the south, down there.
Yeah.
The inspector, we signed off on it, so then we went to go back after the inspector and everything else. But in the meantime, the contractor went bankrupt, so we were just going money into my hole.
That's why we require a 2-year bond, maintenance bond, to sort of be able to find some, if something pops up.
Any other questions on that?
I have a question, it's not related to this, but where are we at with finding a replacement for Chuck?
We had 2 interviews this afternoon. And I think we have a candidate that we'll be making an offer to within the next day or so. It is someone who has worked with the city before, working for a consulting firm, and went on from there and worked at the city of Renton for a while, works for the FAA right now, managing construction projects.
Yes, sir, you may.
I don't keep feeling right now. Chuck has left us.
Chuck has left the city. He had an offer from the city of Edgewood for significantly more money than he was getting here, and so he elected to go there. He didn't want to play the game, well, I'm gonna try and, leverage this one against this one. They made him an offer, and it was an opportunity he thought he would take.
Anything else from you?
My project status sheet that I usually give out at the beginning of the month is here. It sort of tells you where we are with most of our projects. I have not updated from the beginning of the month. I was prepared to do it a couple of weeks ago. I don't know, something came along.
Just fell out of the sky.
It did. Probably the one important thing, in January, we had the Saturday retreat to talk about our strategic plan. And we will have sort of a schedule for you probably at the next time that I come before you at the committee of the whole. But we do have the final report. And so what I need to do with that is try and condense portions of it down to a couple of pages. But then the whole report will also be available for you to look at if you want to look at the whole thing or the Reader's Digest version. We have a walkthrough for the reservoir repair project tomorrow afternoon at 3. Thursday afternoon at 3, we have a walkthrough for the sidewalk project. At 4 o'clock, we have a walkthrough for the overlay project from 3rd to Ellington. And those bid openings will be on March 1st is the current plan for the bid openings on those two projects. You probably saw the plastic and signage on the senior center. The asbestos abatement contractor began their work yesterday morning. They should have that finished by the end of the week, which means we can roll the other contractor in starting next week.
You know, I don't understand something. About 15 years ago or 20 years ago, they went in and remodeled that senior center, spent a lot of money on a grant. Why wasn't the asbestos removed then?
I have no idea. I believe that was 2009 or 10. The level of the project that was being done at that time, I think when you have asbestos, you've got a couple of different ways to treat it. You can encapsulate it if you put flooring over the top of it so that it does not become loose. It's not a problem. Well, you had a couple layers of flooring in several spots in there, so it was no longer an option to just put another layer of flooring on top. The plan was to go to a vinyl flooring, and you had carpet throughout most of that, so you can't lay it over the top. It just doesn't work. So because we were taking the carpeting out, we were now down to the mastic, which is where the asbestos is, and it's under the whole floor.